The summer of 2023 hit Dry Creek, Texas harder than anyone expected. What started as a typical hot season turned into something the small town hadn't seen in decades. The local news kept repeating the same warnings: water conservation, mandatory restrictions, and prayers for rain that never came. But for Marcus Webb, a 52-year-old mechanical engineer who moved to Dry Creek 3 years ago, the drought was about to become the ultimate test of something he'd been planning since day one. Marcus wasn't like the other folks in town. While his neighbors invested in swimming pools and lush green lawns, he spent his weekends sketching designs in a worn notebook and watching YouTube videos about water storage systems. His wife Linda had supported him, though she admitted she didn't fully understand his obsession. Their daughter Emma, home from college for the summer, just rolled her eyes whenever he started talking about hydraulic pressure and gravity flow. The Webb property sat on 2 acres at the edge of town, bordered by the Johnsons on the left and the Martinez family on the right. Both families had lived in Dry Creek for generations. Both families thought Marcus was a bit odd. And both families were about to get a front-row seat to the craziest construction project their street had ever seen. It started on a Monday morning in early June. Marcus took 2 weeks off from his job at the engineering firm in Austin and hired a small excavation crew. By noon, there was a massive hole in his backyard, and by Tuesday, the entire neighborhood was talking. Tom Johnson, a retired police officer who spent most mornings watering his roses, walked over with his coffee mug. His boots crunched on the dry grass as he approached the construction site. "What in God's name are you building back here, Marcus?" Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead and grinned. "It's a cistern, Tom. Going to hold about 15,000 gallons when it's done." Tom squinted at the hole, then at the strange cone-shaped structure that was being lowered into it. The thing looked like a giant funnel turned upside down, with the narrow end pointing up and the wide end at the bottom. "That thing's upside down, buddy. The wide part should be at the top to catch the rain." Marcus shook his head patiently. "Actually, this design is more efficient. The inverted cone shape creates better pressure distribution and minimizes evaporation. Plus, the narrow opening at the top means less surface area exposed to heat." Tom took a long sip of his coffee and smirked. "If you say so, Professor. Looks like you built it backwards to me." By Wednesday, the story had spread through Dry Creek like wildfire. At the local diner, where everyone gathered for breakfast, Marcus's upside-down cistern became the main topic of conversation. Betty Hernandez, who owned the place, couldn't help but laugh when someone brought it up. "I heard it looks like a tornado stuck in the ground," she said, flipping pancakes on the griddle. Rosa Martinez, who lived next door to Marcus, added her own observations while stirring sugar into her iced tea. "My husband drove by yesterday and couldn't believe it. He said Marcus spent over $20,000 on that thing. 20,000, and it's built completely wrong." The laughter continued. Even the younger crowd, sitting at the counter scrolling through their phones, posted pictures of the construction with captions like "When you order your water tank from Wish" or "Engineering degree from a cereal box." Linda Webb tried to defend her husband at the grocery store, but even she seemed uncertain. "He's really smart about these things," she told her friend Carol near the produce section. "He showed me all these calculations and diagrams. I just smile and nod honestly." Emma felt the embarrassment more than anyone. Her high school friends kept sending her memes about the cistern. One showed a picture of an upside-down pyramid with the caption "Your dad's next project." She loved her father, but sometimes his eccentricity made her want to disappear. By Friday, the cistern was complete. Marcus connected it to his gutters with a sophisticated filtration system and painted the visible top portion a neat gray color. He stood in his backyard that evening, admiring his work while the sun set behind the Texas hills. Linda brought him a cold beer and squeezed his hand. "You really think this is going to work?" Marcus took a drink and nodded confidently. "When this drought gets worse, and it will, we'll have water when nobody else does. Trust me." Linda wanted to believe him, but as she looked at the strange structure and thought about their neighbors' laughter, she couldn't help but feel a knot of worry in her stomach. What if Tom was right? What if Marcus had made an expensive, embarrassing mistake? The weekend passed quietly, but the damage to Marcus's reputation was done. Dry Creek had decided, Marcus Webb was the guy who built his water tank upside down. And that story wasn't going away anytime soon. July arrived with temperatures that broke every record in Dry Creek's history. The thermometer outside Betty's diner hit 107 degrees by noon, and the local lake dropped to 30% capacity. The town council held an emergency meeting and announced Stage 3 water restrictions. No lawn watering, no car washing, showers limited to 5 minutes. Violators would face hefty fines. Marcus noticed the change in how people treated him. At the hardware store, conversations would stop when he walked down the aisle. At the post office, neighbors who used to wave would suddenly become very interested in their mail. The mockery had evolved into something colder, something that felt more like contempt. The worst moment came on a Saturday afternoon at the town's 4th of July barbecue. Marcus and Linda arrived with potato salad, trying to maintain normalcy despite everything. Emma had refused to come, claiming she had plans with friends, but Linda knew the real reason. Tom Johnson was holding court near the grill, entertaining a group with his latest Marcus story. The upside-down cistern had become his favorite punchline. So I told him, I said, Tom, the wide part goes on top. That's just common sense. But does he listen? Nope. Spends 20 grand to prove he's smarter than everyone else. The group erupted in laughter. Marcus froze near the dessert table, pretending he hadn't heard. Linda felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Frank Martinez, Rose's husband, added fuel to the fire. My cousin's an engineer too, and I showed him the pictures. You know what he said? He said that design would lose water pressure and probably collapse under its own weight within a year. Said it was the dumbest thing he'd ever seen. More laughter. Someone made a joke about engineers who couldn't engineer. Another person suggested they should call it the Leaning Tower of Dry Creek. Linda grabbed Marcus's arm. Let's go home. But Marcus stood his ground, his jaw tight. He walked directly toward the group, his plate still in hand. The laughter died down as he approached. You all having a good time? Tom wiped tears from his eyes, still grinning. Oh, come on, Marcus. We're just joking around. You gotta admit, that thing looks pretty strange. Strange doesn't mean wrong, Tom. It means different. There's a difference. Frank crossed his arms. Well, different or not, you're gonna look pretty foolish when that thing fails. Hope you kept the receipt. The comment hit harder than Frank probably intended. Marcus felt something crack inside him, that fragile shell of confidence he'd been maintaining. These weren't just strangers on the internet. These were his neighbors, people he'd waved to every morning, people he'd helped jumpstart their cars and borrowed tools from. Linda tugged his arm again, more urgently this time. Marcus, please. They left the barbecue early, driving home in silence. When they pulled into their driveway, Marcus sat in the truck for several minutes, staring at the gray top of his cistern visible in the backyard. Linda watched him, seeing the defeat in his shoulders. What if they're right? Marcus finally whispered. What if I made a terrible mistake? August came with a vengeance that made July look merciful. The drought entered its 3rd month with no relief in sight. The local lake was now at 15% capacity, and the town council announced Stage 4 restrictions. Water would be rationed. Each household would receive a daily allocation. Emergency services only. Marcus watched the news every night, his notebook open on his lap, calculating and recalculating. Linda noticed he barely slept anymore. Emma called from her friend's house less and less, avoiding the tension that had settled over their home like dust. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was checking his cistern levels, something he did religiously every day, when Tom Johnson appeared at the fence. But this time Tom wasn't smiling. His face was red, and not from the heat. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Marcus turned, surprised by the serious tone. Sure, Tom. What's up? Tom shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. The city cut our water allocation again. We're down to 30 gallons a day for a family of 4. My wife's talking about going to stay with her sister in Oklahoma until this is over. He paused, looking at the ground. How much water do you have in that thing? Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans. About 12,000 gallons right now. Been collecting rainwater since June. Plus I filled it before the restrictions hit. Tom's eyes widened. 12,000? That's impossible. We barely get any rain. The design captures moisture from the air too. The inverted cone creates condensation overnight when temperatures drop. It's not a lot, maybe 20 gallons a week, but it adds up. Plus, the narrow opening means almost zero evaporation loss. A traditional cistern my size would have lost 30% to evaporation by now. For the first time since Marcus moved to Dry Creek, Tom looked at him with something other than amusement or skepticism. He looked at him with need. Could you spare some water? I'll pay whatever you want. My grandkids are coming next week, and I don't know how we're going to manage. Marcus felt a dozen emotions hit him at once. Vindication, anger, sympathy, pride. He thought about all the jokes, all the mockery, all those moments of doubt. He could say no. He could turn Tom away and let him feel what humiliation tastes like. But he didn't. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring whatever containers you have. No charge. Tom's relief was visible. He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it. Thank you, Marcus. I mean it, and I'm sorry about all the jokes. I was wrong. If you've been rooting for Marcus this whole time, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next is going to change everything in Dry Creek, and you won't want to miss it. Word spread through Dry Creek faster than the heat waves shimmering off the asphalt. By Wednesday afternoon, there was a line of neighbors in Marcus's driveway, each holding buckets, jugs, and old milk containers. The upside-down cistern that had been the town's biggest joke was now its lifeline. Frank Martinez was third in line, his pride visibly wounded as he approached. Marcus, look, I owe you an apology. What I said at the barbecue was out of line. Marcus handed him 2 5-gallon containers filled with clean, cool water. We all make mistakes, Frank. Take what you need. Rosa Martinez came the next day, tears in her eyes. My mother's staying with us, and she needs water for her medications. The pharmacy can't operate without clean water. You're saving lives here, Marcus. By the end of the week, Marcus had distributed over 2,000 gallons. But his cistern still held strong at 10,000 gallons. The design was working exactly as he'd calculated. While traditional cisterns across town sat empty or nearly dry, his inverted cone captured every drop of morning dew, every bit of condensation, and stored it with almost zero loss. Linda watched from the kitchen window, a smile finally returning to her face. She brought him lemonade as he helped an elderly couple fill their containers. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Not because you were right, but because you're being kind even after how they treated you. Emma came home that weekend and saw the line of neighbors. Her father, the man she'd been embarrassed by, was now being hugged by Mrs. Chun from the corner house. Mr. Patterson, the high school principal, shook his hand like he was meeting a hero. Dad, Emma said that night at dinner, my friends have been asking if we can help their families too. Marcus nodded, exhausted but satisfied. Tell them to come by. We have enough. The local news caught wind of the story. A reporter from Austin drove out to interview the man with the upside-down cistern. Marcus explained the engineering principles on camera, his confidence fully restored. The inverted design isn't revolutionary, he told the reporter. It's just physics applied correctly. People assume traditional was better, but sometimes traditional is just what we're used to, not what's optimal. The segment aired on Thursday evening. By Friday morning, Marcus had calls from engineering firms, water management companies, and even a representative from the Texas Water Development Board. They wanted to study his design, potentially implement it across drought-prone areas. But the most meaningful moment came Sunday morning when the entire neighborhood gathered in his backyard. Tom Johnson stood on a plastic chair and raised his voice above the crowd. We owe Marcus an apology. All of us. We laughed when we should have listened. We mocked when we should have learned. This man saved our summer, maybe saved some of our lives. 3 cheers for Marcus Webb and his brilliant upside-down cistern. The cheers echoed through Dry Creek, and for the first time in months, Marcus felt truly home. September brought the first hints of relief. The weather forecast predicted rain within 2 weeks, and the temperatures finally dropped below triple digits. But the transformation in Dry Creek had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with perspective. Marcus's phone rang constantly. Engineering students from Texas A&M wanted to visit and study his cistern design. A water conservation nonprofit invited him to speak at their annual conference in Houston. The local community college asked him to teach a weekend workshop on sustainable water systems. Linda couldn't believe the change. The same neighbors who had whispered behind their backs now stopped by with homemade pies and thank you cards. Betty from the diner gave them free breakfast for a month. The hardware store owner refused to let Marcus pay for supplies, insisting it was the least he could do. But the real healing happened quietly, in small moments that mattered more than any accolades. Tom Johnson showed up one Saturday morning with his toolbox. "I've been thinking about building one of these myself. Mind if I pick your brain while I help you with maintenance?" They spent the afternoon together, Marcus explaining the mathematics while Tom took notes like an eager student. The mockery had been replaced by genuine respect and friendship. Frank Martinez brought his teenage son Miguel, who was interested in engineering. Marcus spent 2 hours showing the kid his original sketches, explaining how he'd calculated the cone angle and the optimal depth. Miguel's eyes lit up with the same passion Marcus remembered from his own youth. The boy looked up at Marcus with admiration. "Mr. Webb, did you always know it would work?" Marcus paused, remembering those dark nights of doubt, the moment at the barbecue when he'd almost given up. "Honestly, Miguel, I believed in the math, but belief and certainty aren't the same thing. There were moments I questioned everything. But sometimes you have to trust your knowledge even when everyone else doubts you." Emma overheard the conversation from the porch. She walked over and put her arm around her father's shoulders. "That's my dad. Stubborn as a mule, but usually right." The town council invited Marcus to their September meeting. Mayor Patricia Owens, a stern woman who rarely showed emotion, actually smiled as she presented him with a commendation. "Mr. Webb, your innovation and generosity during our crisis exemplifies the best of Dry Creek. You've not only helped your neighbors survive this drought, but you've given us a model for the future. We're officially adopting your cistern design for all new construction in the county." The room erupted in applause. Marcus stood there, holding the framed certificate, feeling Linda squeeze his hand on one side and Emma beam with pride on the other. That night, rain finally came. Not much, just a light drizzle, but enough to make everyone step outside and lift their faces to the sky. Marcus stood in his backyard, watching the water collect in his cistern's narrow opening, the system working perfectly even in gentle rain. Tom appeared at the fence, umbrella in hand. "You know what, Marcus? That thing's not upside down at all. I think the rest of us just had it backwards this whole time." 2 years later, Dry Creek looked different. Not just because the drought had finally ended, but because the landscape itself had transformed. Across the town, 17 properties now featured inverted cone cisterns, each one a testament to what happens when innovation meets necessity. Marcus stood in his backyard on a cool October morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. His cistern, now weathered and adorned with climbing vines that Linda had planted, had become a landmark. Tour groups occasionally drove by to see the original upside-down cistern that had started a revolution. The engineering firm in Austin had promoted him to senior consultant. His specialty? Sustainable water systems for arid climates. He designed cisterns for 3 other Texas counties, consulted on projects in Arizona and New Mexico, and even flew to California to advise on their drought response initiatives. But the success hadn't changed him. Every Saturday morning, he still held free workshops in his backyard, teaching anyone interested about water conservation and cistern design. Miguel Martinez, now a freshman studying civil engineering at UT Austin, came home on weekends to help. Emma graduated with honors and surprised everyone by choosing environmental engineering as her major. She told her parents over dinner one night that watching her father's perseverance had inspired her entire career path. "I used to be embarrassed," she admitted with a laugh. "Now I brag about you to everyone I meet." Tom Johnson had become Marcus's closest friend. They'd built a second cistern on Tom's property together, and now spent Sunday afternoons fishing at the lake, which had returned to full capacity. Tom loved telling the story of his skepticism to anyone who would listen, always ending with the same line. Best humble pie I ever ate. The town celebrated the anniversary of Marcus's cistern every August with a water conservation festival. This year, Mayor Owens had asked Marcus to give the keynote speech. He stood before 300 people, many from neighboring towns, and shared the story that had changed his life. The hardest part wasn't building the cistern, Marcus told the crowd. It was believing in it when nobody else did. Innovation always looks strange at first. It always faces resistance. But if your math is solid and your purpose is good, trust yourself. The world will catch up. The applause was thunderous. Linda and Emma stood in the front row, both crying happy tears. After the speech, dozens of people lined up to shake his hand, ask questions, and share their own stories of being doubted. As the sun set on Dry Creek that evening, Marcus sat on his porch with Linda, watching neighbors water their gardens without worry, children playing in sprinklers, life flowing abundantly once again. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. If it touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below telling me what story you'd like to hear next. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more incredible journeys with you. Remember, sometimes the craziest ideas are just genius waiting to be understood. Until next time, keep believing in yourself.